Hello everyone, welcome back to Basics, the channel where I talk about everything and anything to do with the bass guitar. Today is part 4 of my series, The History of the Bass Guitar. And we're going to be going into the 80s and the 90s today and doing a brief look at them, as well as recapping what we learned last week, which ended with me just discussing that it was basically more of the playing style that changed in the 70s with some minor adjustments. But it was still a great period for bass because bass became a much more popular instrument in the 60s and 70s. So without further ado, let's get down to it. So we're starting off in the 80s because we left off in the 70s and that's how time works. That should be obvious. Anyway, the 80s brought harder music in the form of punk and in the form of metal. They were both faster styles of music, more prone to using a pick or humbucker pickups. And they're just very fast, very different, and heavier, meaning they had darker lyrics, darker themes. And this is what you had. And then you had punk music, which was more political, more driven about what was actually going on at the time. And just also very hard, but not as complex as metal. It's very fast kind of music. So this led to a different style of bass playing, where you're more, like I said, more prone to using a pick in this style because it's fast and it gives a different tone. And it influenced the next decade, the 90s, because that was also not as heavy, but more apathetic, just like, kind of like a whatever kind of tone. And it just set the stage for grunge and alternative music, where they played off those themes, maybe not as extreme as some metal genres, but definitely they did something. And that's an important thing to note, that it influenced the next decade, because the next decade had an influx of a whole bunch of different bass companies that were around maybe since the 70s and stuff, but they really started getting popular in the 90s, like Ibanez. You had a Yamaha. Gibson was getting really popular because of Nirvana. So you just also had a bunch of new, well, not new, but other companies getting popular in the 90s as well. Another thing that happened in the 90s was that even slapping became more mainstream because of bands like Primus and the Red Hot Chili Peppers. So slapping became even more prevalent than it was before, and now we have memes about slapping the bass. And and this influx of new basses continued throughout the early 2000s and continues even a bit till this day. But we'll talk about that more in the next episode of this series. And I hope you guys stick around for that, because after that, we're going to wrap this up with a finale about talking about the future of the bass, which could get very, very interesting. So I hope you stick around. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Remember, you can like, subscribe, and answer today's question of the day. Is the coolest band name you have ever heard? It could be a famous band, it could be a band you played in or saw that's not very popular, but what is the coolest band name you have ever heard of all time? Answer it down in the comments below. Go. Anyway, I hope you guys stay safe out there, and just remember to have an awesome day, guys. Stay safe, folks.